Hebrews chapter 11, verse number 7. I need a good place to recut my video to start back when I cut the first part of the service out. No. We're going back into this verse, though, because Lori was sitting the other day and she asked me a question about it. And I said, well, I answered that. I said that in the message, but I also stepped back and realized, well, I said very little about it. I just mentioned the phrase, gave a quick answer, and then moved on real quick because it wasn't my focus. And I still wasn't necessarily going to come back and revisit this verse. But I heard one of my favorite preachers, who is a tremendous preacher. Like what I'm getting ready to say, I don't want it to sound like I'm being disrespectful to him, but he's probably my favorite preacher to listen to, super intelligent guy. But I heard him preaching a message where he was talking about what's the difference between the world and the earth in the Bible. And he's not wrong entirely about what he said in his message, but it's just something that the more I thought about it, the more I realized that he's also missing a step. Like his definition's only part of a definition. And then the more I thought about that, I realized that's true of most of us. Because some people, when you read your Bible and you read the word world, you just process it as earth. And you don't even think about, does it mean something else to God than earth? And then other people read it and they automatically run to the world system and to the people and society without ever considering, is that really all that it means to God? And that's the direction my friend goes into, and the direction most preachers, myself included, would normally take the word. But that's why I want to do a quick run through the Bible and see what it means when it says world, and then I'll answer the question, what does it mean when it says Noah condemned the world? Because it is an interesting statement in Hebrews 11 and verse 7. So let's read that. By faith, Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet, moved with fear, prepared an ark to the saving of his house, by the which he condemned the world and became heir of righteousness, which is by faith. The reason why it's a strange statement to us is because we don't think of Noah as condemning the world. We think of him as saving his family, but Noah is a preacher of righteousness. It's not like the stories and movies and stuff that have come out over the years. I don't even remember the movies. I didn't watch it, but I know there was one that come out sometime before I ever come here, I think, where it was a big Hollywood version of Noah. And the whole point, because this was the big protest, was that he was trying to fight the people and keep them off of the ark. It's like, no, he preached for 120 years for people to turn to God. I don't think he was fighting them to keep them from turning to God. He gave 120 years of his life as a preacher of righteousness according to God. So Noah wasn't fighting to keep people off the ark. So it's a strange idea when God says he condemned the world in building the ark. But I want to understand what God means by the world first, and then we can try to look at what it means Noah condemned the world. Because it is interesting to me that there are some verses where it's very clear your doctrine depends on what you understand in this word. I mean, I was going to get to them last, but I'll throw a couple of them out to you real quick. Romans 5:12, for by one man sin entered the world and death by sin. What does he mean by that? Does he mean just the world system? Does he mean society? Because that's a huge change in doctrine, because we understand that sin on this planet did not begin until Adam fell in sin in the garden. And so if you interpret it as only the world system and so forth, you just changed the Bible. You just changed it so that there's potential for those who believe gap theory and stuff to throw it in there. Romans 12:2, be ye not conformed to this world. Well, that goes the other direction. Your doctrine really depends, because if you think he's only talking about the planet, then that verse means something very strange to you. But if you understand him talking about the world system, okay, that verse makes perfect sense. I shouldn't act like the world in terms of like society and the system of this world. Matthew 12:32, when he talks about the world to come, it means something very big depending on which way you interpret that, whether you're talking about a new planet or a new society. And then Isaiah 13:11, I will punish the world for their wickedness. This one's one that's very interesting, because he's talking about the Great Tribulation. He's talking about when he's pouring his wrath out on the world. And is he talking about the society, or is he talking about the planet? What is he talking about? Now, the answer I'm going to give you, and I'm going to go and give it to you up front, is that when God talks about the world in the Bible, you have to pay attention to the context a lot of times to be sure what exactly he's referring to. But in reality, what he means, he's talking about life on the surface of the earth. He's talking about life on the surface of the earth, whether that's plant life, whether that's animal life, whether that's people, whether it's our society and our culture, whatever it is, it's whatever is going on within the surface of the earth. That's what he's talking about. And I'll show you that, because God defines it many times that he's talking about the planet and what's going on, and not just the people. And then other times he's very clear he's talking about the people, but not necessarily the dirt and all the other stuff that's on the surface of the earth. And the reason why again, this may not seem like a big deal to you, but the reason why I care about it is because I see intelligent people arguing about it and people misunderstanding it, and it does affect your doctrine at some point, what you believe he means by that word. And so for me, it's a matter of let's just go ahead and settle it up front because it's actually quite easy. The reason why most people don't do it is because just to study the word world, that's no variation of the word world. It's just the word. It's not earth. It's not any of the other words that are similar. Just world. You have to read more than 200. You have to read 250 verses just to study that one word. So the reason why somebody can get up and preach whatever they want to and nobody ever bats an eye and never thinks anything else about it is because it's easy for them to throw out 70 verses that support their opinion when there's 250 verses. It can ignore the others and you've got all you need. And most people will assume you've done your homework. So I'm going to encourage you because I'm not going to read 250 verses to you tonight. I'm going to encourage you that you'll see I'm throwing out verses that show each version of this so that you can see all of this is there. And then you can get you a Bible study resource, look up the word, and go through however many verses you have to before you start to realize, yeah, you know what? He does use the word all those different ways because he's not just talking about one very specific thing. He's talking about something quite broad. And so with that, before we can understand Noah condemning the world, let's do a word study of the Bible to find out how the word world is used. So let's go back to 1 Samuel 2 and verse 8. This is the first verse that's going to pop up for you. If you actually just put in the word world in a search engine for the Bible and search it, this will be the first verse that'll come up for you. So 1 Samuel chapter 2 and verse 8. And I'll be honest, for me, this one actually by itself, if you know what the rest of the verses say, this one could define it for you up front. Because this one does address everything to a sense. 1 Samuel 2 and verse number 8 says this. He raiseth up the poor out of the dust, and lifteth up the beggar from the dunghill, to set them among the princes, and to make them inherit the throne of glory, for the pillars of the earth are the Lord's upon them. So, if you know what to look for, it's all there. The fact that he's talking about the planet is seen by the fact that over and over again, and I'm going to show you in just a moment the verses where he defines the world as being the surface of the earth. So he's saying the world is the surface and the earth is the planet, and the pillars of the earth are the planet sustaining the earth, the world, I'm sorry. So that's there. That's in the verse. It's the last part of it. The world system is in it as he's talking about society and wealth and all this stuff in the first part of the verse. He's talking about taking the poor and the beggars out of these places. So that's within the verse as well. So you're seeing already that most everything that he can mean by the word is already in that one verse. You just have to already know that when you read it, or else you're not going to get that. In fact, if you just read that verse by itself, you would walk away assuming the word world means the earth, like the livable part of the earth, the habitable part of the earth, the surface of it. Now, if we continue on, though, Job 37 and verse 12. Now, admittedly, this is Elihu speaking, Job's friend, and so you cannot take it as gospel, so to speak. You have to understand that Job's friends are not always right, but it does show you that in the context of the Bible, what the people within the Bible understand the word world to mean. And then I'll give you a verse where God himself actually comes in and supports what Elihu's about to say. So Job 37 and verse number 12. It says, and as it turned around about by his counsel, that they may do whatsoever he command them upon the face of the world in the earth. So what's the face of the world? It's the face of the earth is what he's saying. Elihu is using the word to say that the people here do whatever God, God's in charge of whatever the people on the face of the earth are doing. The world is the face of the earth in that verse. Now, again, you can't take him as your final authority, though, because just like Job's other friends, he could be wrong about stuff. And Job's other friends are wrong about a lot of stuff. But as far as the way they use the word, it's a pretty good thing to see. All right, Isaiah 27 and verse 6. And there'll be a lot of turning back and forth. I apologize. I try not to do that to you too much. But tonight, this Bible study is going to have to actually be a Bible study. Isaiah 27 and verse number 6. He shall cause them that come out of Jacob to take root. Israel shall blossom and bud and fill the face of the world with fruit. So you think about it. If he's just talking about society, you just saw two people use the word, and God also, going back to Samuel, Of course, this is also this is God speaking, His Holy Spirit. But you saw 3 times where God or someone has used the word to talk about the surface of the earth, the face of the earth as being the world. It's the crust. It's the part that we live on. It's the habitable part of the earth. So that's 3 times you've seen it. So anybody who says that it cannot mean anything but the world system and society, the people and so forth, and you're not used to this because I don't preach that to you. So you may be sitting here tonight thinking, well, why do we care? Because I don't preach that to you. But there are preachers out there that if you get a hold of them, they do preach that to you. And so I'm warning you before you get there. And so you see that God uses the word to say that. Psalm 89 and verse 11. Psalm 89 and verse number 11. The heavens are thine, the earth also is thine, for the world and the fullness thereof thou hast founded them. Here's where I want you to notice something that you probably also already were picking up on, but I want you to catch this. God does not use the word earth and world synonymously. The word earth can be used to talk about more, because he'll say like the surface of the earth or something like that. But the world is not meant to be referring to the whole planet. It's the habitable part of the planet. The word earth is used to talk about the planet as a whole. And this is the reason why someone who builds the doctrine that earth means planet, world means society, this is where they start to get that from, is because God does clearly define 2 different understandings by this. So when he says the heavens, I'm not getting into this tonight, but if you don't know this, the Bible refers to 3 heavens. And you know that because Paul talks about, for example, knowing a man who, whether it was in the spirit or in the flesh, was called up into the 3rd heaven, talking about where God's throne is. The first heavens, as we've talked about in Genesis, when he talks about our atmosphere and everything that's under the firmament. And then the 3rd heaven would be everything in between. It's outer space. 2nd heaven, would be everything in between. That's outer space. So when he talks about the heavens, he defines that. He says, okay, those belong to God. The earth itself, like the planet as a whole, it belongs to God. And then he says the crust of it, the life and everything that exists with the surface, with on that planet, I should say. Everything that exists on that planet is also, he's saying, it's his. That's what he means by the fullness thereof. And you will understand that God, when he says the fullness thereof, is not just talking about the people. And the reason for that is because some of you already know Psalm 50 tells us God is speaking to Israel, and he's saying, if I was hungry, I would not ask of you. He said, why? Because the world is mine and the fullness thereof. Is he going to eat the people? Is that what he's saying? No. Is he talking about society's mine? Well, yeah, that's part of it. What does he actually go into that verse with, though? The cattle of 1,000 hill and more are mine. So what's he defining as being the fullness of the earth then? In the context, the fullness of the earth are the cattle of 1,000 hill and more. It's the things that are upon the face of the earth. In fact, I'll throw another verse out there for you, is Proverbs 8 and verse 26. I won't turn there. I'll just tell you it. It says, the highest parts of the dust of the world. How can you say the highest parts of the dust of the world? 'Cause I'm only picking the specific phrase out of that I want you to catch. How can you define the highest parts of the dust of the world as being people? Now, I know from the dust we came, from the dust we'll return, but that's not what he's saying in that context. He's talking about mountains. He's saying the highest parts of the earth are the mountains. If unless you really want to get crazy and try to make it say something it doesn't. So he's saying all of the surface of the earth, the highest dust on the mountains, everything that belongs to him. So what God's defining for us, and I'm getting ready to run through a list of verses where God defines that there's a difference in his eye between the planet as a whole, the habitable part of the surface, the heavens, and so forth. And the reason why that matters is because you have to understand something. While God doesn't get into a great deal about some of the things we would like him to, God does talk enough for us to understand some things about the planet we live on. For example, hell's in the heart of the earth. If hell is in the heart of the earth, as the Bible says, because it does say that, it's very clearly defined in the Bible. 3 days and 3 nights, so shall the Son of Man be in the heart of the earth. It's in the heart of the earth he's talking about. If God can say that to people in China and people here and people everywhere, then the heart of the earth has to be in the center of the earth. It has to mean what the word should definitely mean, which means if it's this shaped, over here and over here can't say the heart of the earth is in the same place. It's not the same to everybody. But if it's this shaped, then the heart of the earth is always underneath the feet of every person. Well, so when he says he descended to the heart of the earth and so forth, it makes sense that way. So God gets into those things and he discusses that for us and he shows it to us. But that's not why I'm in this message. I mean, there's some interesting stuff and all of that I can show you from the Bible, but in the end of the day, the reason why I care about this is not because I want to argue with you about those kind of things. It's because of the fact that what you define when you say words in the Bible, what that means to you changes doctrine. So your personal opinions about certain things, I don't care about. We're not going to argue about it. It's not a problem for me. I'm not going to get up here and preach them. I'm not going to teach them because they're not my opinions. But when it comes to the way we define words, that shapes doctrine because that's how we define everything. Words are the foundation of our society. It's how we communicate. It's everything. That's why without understanding, there's no profit. So like if you don't understand tonight what I'm saying or why I'm saying it, then there's no profit to you. But that's why we have to understand that God does define the planet as a whole and those things that are inside of it, like hell, for example, and formerly Abraham's bosom and all that stuff, because it's in the heart of the earth, he says. You understand that. Those things are not considered to be part of the world, so to speak, because they're not the habitable part. They're not the earth, the surface, sorry. They're not the surface of the earth. But the earth itself is containing all of that. So it's really a simple thing. Like if I talk about your car, I talk about everything that's in your car. If I talk about your bicycle, I talk about everything that's on. I don't have to define, well, this is the chain, this is the pedals, this is the wheel. If I say bicycle, you get that I mean all of it. But if I'm only talking about one piece, then I need to use that word. I'm not going to say bicycle, you need to change your bicycle if I mean you need to change your tire. I need to be specific. And so when God gets specific, we have to be sure that we understand why and what he means by that. So there's the difference between earth and world. You're stepping down. Now, earth describes everything broadly. World is when you start describing the habitable part of it and the surface and so forth and what's on there, including societies. Because I don't want people to think I'm against saying it means society. That's why I started by showing you there's verses that has to mean that. When God said, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish but have everlasting life, he didn't mean the planet. God was not an environmentalist who said, I love this planet so much, I'm going to give my son to die on a cross for it. He was talking about the people and the systems and all that stuff that are there. Not even the systems, I should say. Let me take that back. He was talking about the people. And so you see that when he talks about the world, it does matter that you understand that. Both sides of it, though, is true. So Psalm 90 and verse 2, while we're still here close by. Psalm 90 and verse number 2. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever thou hast formed the earth and the world, and from everlasting, even from everlasting to everlasting, thou art God. So think about what he just said. Of course, earth and world are defined as two different ideas in that verse. That's why I want you to see it. So God does use the word separately, but he's saying before God formed the earth, the planet and the everything that's in it, and before he formed the world, which is the habitable part, and you understand that those were formed at different times in a sense. Like the water was there from the beginning, but the earth was not, the dirt, let me say it so I don't get you the wrong terms here and get you mixed up. The world, the dirt of the world, was not called forth out of that sea until what, about the third day, when he put the plant life on it? So, you understand, God formed those at different times. It's not even strange that he would use different terms for them because they weren't even formed on the same day. The earth and everything it contains was made one day, and that included the land. But the land was not called forth from the sea until a few days later. So the fact that God uses the terms differently is not strange, but I also want you to notice the way he says it here in the verse, that he formed them. So yes, you can say God formed society because God formed the foundations of society, like the family, the home, and all of that. He puts governments in order. He says all of that. But in the context, it's very clear he's not talking about that when he says this. He's talking about the habitable part of the planet that we live on. All right, so Isaiah 34 and verse number 1. Come near, ye nations, to hear, and hearken, ye people. Let the earth hear, and let all that is therein, the world and all the things that come forth of it. So all the things that come forth of the world. He doesn't say just the people, all the things that come forth from the world. So again, this is all the life, all the things on the planet. Trees, everything would be counted in that kind of idea. He's defining it as all the life on the surface. All right, then if we go even a little bit further, Jeremiah 10, verse number 12. There's actually two verses that say this. This is still showing you that the word is used differently. It's not, that God defines them as two different things when he says earth and world. Jeremiah 10 and verse number 12. And then we're not going to read it, but you also could read Jeremiah 51 and verse 15, because it says the same exact thing. Jeremiah 10 and verse number 12, you really want to be tricky, you can go read 51 and verse 15 while we read chapter 10 and verse 12. It says, he hath made the earth by his power. He hath established the world by his wisdom. He hath stretched out the heavens by his discretion. In the context, what is he clearly talking about? Everything else is the physical creation. It's the stretching out the heavens, which if you've never listened, we have a great discussion on that with Thaddeus Kuntz one time in a Q&A. But the stretching out of the heavens, which actually answers a lot of questions scientists have about the universe, like the stars and stuff. There's a really great answers found in that statement, the stretching out. But then you have also the fact that he talks about the forming of the planet and the world in that. So if we let the context define for us what he's saying, he's very clearly talking about the habitable surface of the planet. That at the same time he made the earth, he also made a place where we could live in and dwell upon this earth. And again, if you don't know why I'm dealing with this, it may sound strange, but there's purpose for it. So then finally, I could give you a bunch more verses, but I told you I'm not going to give you 250 verses tonight. Isaiah 14 and verse 21, I'll just mention, it talks about the face of the world. So again, it's the face of the world. It's the face of the earth he's talking about when he says that. Here's why it matters to me. One verse I'll give you why it matters to me. John chapter 1, verse 3 and verse 10. So two verses I'll give you, but one of them is the one that matters. John chapter 1 and verse number 3 says that all things were made by him, and nothing was made that wasn't made by him. It's a key doctrine to Christianity to understand that Jesus is the creator. And that because he is the creator of literally every created thing, there's nothing that's created that he didn't create. One of the things that shows you is that Jesus could not be a created being, because otherwise he would have had to create it himself. Because there's no created things, there's no creation that's not made by him. He is the creator of all of it. And so it's a very important verse. Well, if you went down to verse 10, he would tell you that the world was made by him. And in that context, that would change what verse number 3 means now. If he's talking about just the world and not every created thing, then it allows you to start changing some major doctrines in the Bible. But if we understand that when he says the world in verse number 10, he's still talking about creation. He's still talking about the planet, the universe, everything around. When we understand that he's not limiting it to society and people, then our doctrine's not changed in that verse. But when you start messing with the definition of the world and saying it can only mean societies and systems and peoples and all this stuff, that verse gets changed. That verse starts to take on a new meaning, and because it takes on a new meaning, the context starts to take on a new meaning as well. And it starts to mess with some major doctrine. As anybody who's been part of our Bible study alone will know that John chapter 1 is one of the most doctrinally rich chapters in the entire Bible. And that's why I'm very quick not to like it when somebody starts playing with doctrine that's going to affect John chapter 1. Because it's a key verse to key passage to Christianity. Now that I've established, though, that it does talk about the habitable surface of the earth, at least I think I've given you enough for that. Again, I'm encouraging. If I didn't, 250 verses, by the time you get through the Old Testament, I'm pretty sure you'll be fine. I don't think we'll have any questions anymore. But 250 verses, and you can go through it and you can look for more. But let me show you that he does talk about the people, though, because I don't want somebody to think that I'm saying that's not what it means. I'm saying that anything that you could mean when you talk about the life on the surface of this planet, the surface of the planet and the fullness thereof, that's the life. That's the people, the societies, the kingdoms, the everything that you can put, the plant life, the animal life, everything that's on the surface of this planet, everything between the firmament and the earth, the dirt beneath our feet. Once you get, I don't even know how many layers you have to get, how far you have to dig. I don't know. God didn't define that part for me. But I'll take it. We'll take it. But anywhere between the firmament and so far down, wherever the foundations of this world, the surface are, So I don't know, maybe tectonic plates if you want to get scientific. But wherever the foundations are, by the time you get there, God says all of that, somewhere in all of that is the world. Whatever life exists within all of that. So that's why for me it'd be habitable. Like wherever your line is of where habitable surface is, that's probably where your line is. When it starts getting uninhabitable anymore, once you get so deep down, you've probably passed what God defines as the world. But I want you to understand that it does matter. You also include with this societies and kingdoms and all that stuff, that we can't throw that side of the definition away either. Because most of the time in the New Testament, God is using the word to talk about that. Most of the time he is talking about societies, he's talking about peoples, he's talking about the life here on this planet. Not the habitable surface as much as the life that is inhabiting it. Because that's the part he cares about more than the dirt. He cares far more about you than he does the dirt that's on the surface of this planet. And so with that, I want you to look at just a few verses with me. Psalm 17, verse 14 refers to the men of the world. I won't make you turn there because I'm running short on time. But we'll go to Psalm 22 and verse 27. Psalm 22 and verse number 27. If you don't know Psalm 22, I'll even give you a little extra golden nugget tonight to know this. If you don't know it already, Psalm 22 is Jesus speaking. It's actually a first-person perspective, Jesus speaking from the cross. So if you don't know that already, if you didn't learn anything else tonight, I gave you something you can take home with you. Psalm 22 and verse number 27, all the ends of the world shall remember and turn unto the Lord. All the kindreds of the nations shall worship before thee. This one, actually, I wanted to go to it because it establishes something else for us. When God says the ends of the world, he's talking about the habitation. He's talking about societies. Because ends of the world in this verse is talking about all the people on this planet, however far they've reached to, whatever the reach of society and culture and people, whatever that is. All of that, he says, is what's going to remember and turn unto the Lord, and all the kindreds of the nation shall worship before thee. So it's clearly defined. He's talking about the people and the societies and all of that. So this is something that's interesting because when you get to the Bible now, you know when he says the ends of the world, he's not talking about the end of a planet. He's talking about the end of the habitation. He's talking about society. He's talking about how far society has reached on this planet. It's what he means by the end of the world. The ends of the world. The end of the world is a whole other thing. That's the end of society. So then Isaiah 18 and verse 3. We're almost there, but we still have a little bit more turning. Isaiah 18 and verse number 3. When Lori told me her mom was here, she didn't have to translate tonight, I said, I feel sorry for you. Now you know why. Isaiah 18 and verse number 3. It says, all ye inhabitants of the world and dwellers on the earth, see ye that when he lifteth up an ensign on the mountains, and when he bloweth a trumpet, hear ye. So all ye inhabitants of the world and dwellers on the earth. This is where you see, if there's still a question about the fact that earth refers to everything, world refers to the habitable surface. You see that he says that in the passage. Because otherwise, if inhabitants of the world and dwellers of the earth mean two different things, then you have people living under your feet somewhere. That's not what he means by that. It means that the planet as a whole is referred to as the earth. The habitable surface is called the world. And so he uses that terminology, I think in part to show it to us and clarify that so there's no question, but also to show that the people on the world are the ones he's talking about as well. I mean, when he says world, they're included. And I'll go back to my illustration I've used 100 times for what it means when we talk about being in Christ. When I say tram 1, or which tram runs in front of here, 2? Tram 2. We'll use tram 2 since it's our tram for today. When I talk about tram 2, when Gertie gets on that tram and goes home, and I mention the tram, I am referring to her as well because she's part of that now. She's on that tram and she's riding there and she's going to go. Anybody else who happens to be riding that tram, I assume Leah might be on it as well. If not, whatever bus she may be on. When I refer to that bus, I'm referring to all. If I point at the car and say, look, there's Sophania. Well, the car is not Sophania. I'm saying that because Sophania is in the car. You understand that we refer to things that way all the time. That's not strange to do that. So when God says the world, and he's not referring to the dirt that's on the surface, and he's referring to the people, that's not strange because we're all inside of this bus, so to speak. We're inside of that firmament, we're inside of the package, and we're moving along. We're along for the ride, whether we like it or not, and that's just part of how it goes. Then Isaiah 23 and verse 17. I think it's the last verse I have to read. Isaiah 23 and verse 17. I'll mention that while you're looking for it, Psalm 95 or Psalm 90 and verse 5 maybe, verse 9 I mean, 95:9 or 99, one of the two, 98:9 maybe. Isaiah 26:19 and Psalm 24:1 and Jeremiah 25:36 all say the same things I'm saying right now. I just didn't take you to them because, again, we're not reading all 250 verses. Isaiah 23 and verse 17. Says, and it shall come to pass after the end of 70 years, the Lord will visit Tyre and shall turn to her hire and shall commit fornication. She shall turn to her hire and shall commit fornication with all the kingdoms of the world upon the face of the earth. So the kingdoms of the world upon the face of the earth. The world is the face of the earth. The kingdoms of the world are the kingdoms that are part of that. So you're seeing by this point that when God says world, you have to pay attention. You can't just assume that it means societies, it means kingdoms, it means people. You can't assume that it means the planet. So to get up and preach a blanket statement to you and say that it only means planet would be a lie. To get up and preach to you that it only means the societies and peoples and cultures would also be a lie. It means the surface of this planet and all that inhabit it, all the life that is there upon it. Everything. That's what he means by world. But when you get to John 3:16, for God so loved the world, well, we know what he means by that. He's not talking about the animals. He's not, because he didn't redeem them. He's not talking about the dirt because he didn't redeem it. I mean, he'll make a new heaven and new earth. He'll fix all the damage that sin has done, all of that. But he didn't die to redeem that. He died to redeem us. And with that, all of creation, which has been put under the curse, that's why I mentioned early on the verse in Isaiah when it talks about judging the world because of their sin. Who's being judged during tribulation? Well, I mean, it's easy to say the people, but the planet's also being utterly decimated in that time. I mean, you have a planet that the drinking water has been poisoned, the air has been, everything's being poisoned, the trees are being burnt off of the surface, but also the people are being killed. They're having boils, they're having all these afflictions. All the habitable surface, all of life on the planet, everything there is being judged in that time because of sin. So it would be easy to walk away and try to make that fit whichever definition you want. But if you put it where it is, that it's the surface and all that inhabit it, that verse actually makes perfect sense. Because everything's being punished because of Adam's sin, because all the world groaneth right now. All of creation groans right now because of sin. That's why thorns infest the ground. That's why there's poison. That's why there's sickness. That's why there's disease. That's why all these things exist, is because all of creation groans under the weight of Adam's sin. And while the eternal judgment for your sin was paid for on the cross, and you can be forgiven right now, and you can have that redemption right now, you know yourself, you will not feel the full deliverance until your body is made into an incorruptible body. This world will not feel the full deliverance until Christ's kingdom is established and all of that has been done because of sin is done away with. So going back to our verse and understanding what the word world means, it means the habitable part of this earth and all the life and things that are a part of that. You can look at the verses I gave you up front and see that it matters now what your doctrine is. And I'll tell you the reason why somebody wants to change this and make it mean one thing. It's because no matter how smart somebody is, sometimes we get a doctrine in our head and we go to the Bible and we try to make it fit our doctrine instead of changing our doctrine to fit the Bible. No matter how smart you are, everybody struggles with that. We get to the Bible and we already have a preconceived notion. We have an idea about what it's supposed to say. And the gap theory is one of those that people tend to do that with. So the reason why you want it to only mean, why somebody would want it to only mean the people, not anything to do with the planet or anything else, is because by one man sin in the world, death by sin, you can change what that means if you change the word world. And you can start saying that there was people before Adam and that there was civilizations and societies and all this stuff that the Bible gives no teaching for, that goes contrary to the Bible. In fact, I didn't plan to attack the gap theory tonight, but let me say this. If anybody struggles with the gap theory, the reason why the world was without form and void, because that's the whole thing they build upon, is because the land was not pulled out of the sea until the third day. The context of the verse tells you why it was without form and void. It's not because God destroyed it and made it without form and void. It's because God made it. The land was under the sea because it was flat. I mean, not flat in that sense, but like there was no mountains, no lands called out, any of that stuff. It was just a ball and then another ball of water around. Or if you define it as flat, it can be as flat as you want. I don't care. But at the end of the day, whatever shape you want it to be, the water was overcovering the entire surface of the earth because the surface of the earth didn't have the shapes necessary to stick out of that water. God called them out, and that's when it had shape, and that's when he put the plants on it. Until then, it was without form and void for that very reason. It's not because God made it, destroyed it, and then had to fix it and make it again. When he says by one man sin in the world, death by sin, it means this entire habitable surface of this planet, there was not sin existing within it until Adam fell in sin. Now, let me be clear about something. I do not believe that means that the angels did not fall and the angels didn't fall until after Adam, because the devil was there to tempt Adam before. I believe that when we talk about the habitable surface and the life of the planet, we're not talking about spiritual beings and things that exist outside of this, because they're not part of Adam's kingdom and Adam's race and all of that. So I don't think they have anything to do with this conversation. So anybody who tries to run that direction also gets in trouble. All right, with that said, to answer the question, how did Noah condemn the world? Noah condemned the world because there was a world that was about to be destroyed and he turned his back on it. Not because he turned his back by saying, I don't care about you, you can die, but in the sense that Noah turned his back away from all habitable life and habitable surface, knowing it was going to be destroyed. He built an ark. He saved his family. The faith he had in God to say, I'm not going to sit here and be part of this society anymore. The faith he had in God to say, I'm not just going to be like everybody else and pretend that nothing's going to happen and ignore the judgment of God, saved his family. That's why he became heir of righteousness, is because his faith in God saved him. The physical act of building the ark justified his faith in the eyes of us, because it shows us that by turning from the world to God and putting his faith in God's promise to judge this world, that he must have believed him because he built an ark and he did it. So it justifies him in our eyes. But at the end of the day, it was his faith in God that saved him. And by turning his back on the world, he condemned the world. I mean, the world died. I mean, it's not like the habitable surface of the earth and all the life on it didn't get destroyed. And could Noah have saved them? No, he couldn't have done anything more than what he did. So if you think condemning them means that he was the judge who sat on the judgment seat and he's the one who decided to destroy them, no, that's not what it means. It means that when he turned his back on this world and he got in that ark and God shut that door and the rains began to pour, that world was destroyed and it died. It was condemned. Noah was not the chief architect of that, but he was part of the process. Because God, through Noah, preserved human life upon this earth and also animal life and everything else. So that through his family, God brought forth life once again on the world. But without that, it wouldn't, it would have all been destroyed. So if you're talking about what it means, the reason why I gave a simple answer the first time is because in all honesty, it's quite simple what it means. He was not the judge who decided that people had to die, but he at some point made a decision, I'm not going to die with them. And when he made that decision, I'm not going to die with him, I'm going to put my faith in God, he turned his back on the world and condemned the world in his eyes. Like to him, the world was dead at that point. He was no longer going to be part of it. He put his faith in God and he was following the Lord. And with that, he became an heir of righteousness. So it's a simple phrase. We didn't put a lot of time into it, but I saw a study there that you may not need it now, but someday you may need it, that will help you to understand next time you read the word world in the Bible or the word earth in the Bible, pay attention and ask, what is he talking about? Earth, you know it. It's straightforward. He's talking about the planet. When he says world, what is he talking about? He's talking about the people, the planet, life in general upon the habitable surface. What does he mean? The kingdoms, because you have to understand what he's talking about when you read those verses. Some of the most important verses in the Bible use that word. All right. Father, we thank you and praise you, God, for what you do. We pray that you watch over us, help us to serve you. We thank you, Lord, for your blessings and for your goodness. I pray, God, that you'd help us just to be faithful to you in all things. I pray that you give us wisdom, God. Just bless what's been said here tonight. Help us, Lord, to understand this about the Bible, how important it is to define words properly and understand what you mean by them. We thank you, God, for all these things. We ask it in your Son, Jesus' name. Amen. All right. I appreciate you being here to be part of the service. You can take some time to fellowship and you're going to be dismissed. And G, cut up that live stream.